So what about the innkeeper? What do you think about him?
Oof. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I guess.
He's like a gossip character because he never says anything. You know, it just said Mary and Joseph went to the stable because there was no room in the inn. But we know there must have been an innkeeper that said you can stay out there. So he's a character.
I mean, more than likely, I'm sure they just didn't try one spot. Like, if you were to go try and get a room for the night and somebody tells you, yeah, sorry, we're full up, like, you wouldn't go knock on another door?
That makes it even worse. Like, he was like maybe the fifth guy they went to, right? And he didn't have a room either, right? Well, what do you think about him?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I kind of think, well, does he get points, right? Like, well, I do have a barn. I mean, do you get, like, half credit for that, right? Like, well, I don't have a room, but I do have a barn. I mean, at least he gave him a barn instead of nothing.
Maybe. I think there's a lot of implications of the innkeeper on us in our culture today, because one of the things we find ourselves so smothered by everything that's going on in Christmas, and we fill everything about our life up, and then when something else comes along, you're saying, I don't have room, yeah. I don't have a space for that. And I think that we really struggle with this. How can we fit God and Jesus in the right proportion to everything else? And I think a lot of times we stick him in a stable rather than, let him in the living room.
And we hear this a lot. The word I've heard a lot lately, right, kind of the buzzword would be capacity, right? That I have to build my capacity or, like, make space for things. And this is really popular, I think, in today's world because, our time is so precious. The demands are so high. We're so busy. We just stay busy all day. Like, there's not any capacity in there for other things. And I think when your schedule starts to get compressed, what's the first thing to get cut? Is it really the move that God's making in your life? Is it those things that God wants you to do? Aren't those like the first to kind of get cut?
I think this is a big deal about us living our lives with a certain capacity to let God be active inside of us. We've had this theme, Christmas prime time. What are we asking people to do? And we were saying this year, let's build in some capacity for what God's doing to us and through us and with us.
And a certain amount of flexibility, following and walking with God means that you've got to be at least a little bit flexible in your life, that you can't time it all out and you can't plan it all out because that's not the way God will not operate like that.
But how much flexibility should we give God? Like 10%, 50%? Like, God ought to get all the flexibility, right?
I think these are like the subconscious calculations that happen in most people's mind. Like when is that too much?
I think the innkeeper, he just kind of flamed out. So, you like the wise men?
Yeah.
And you like Joseph?
Yeah.
I really like the wise men. Mm-hmm. You like the shepherds?
Love the shepherds.
We got a question.
Okay.
An observation, and I'm going to vote on Joseph on this one, for the simple reason is what's his occupation? He's a carpenter. He's a builder. And he is going to be a tool of God in order to provide some direction on how Jesus builds a church. And, how to read the blueprints, how to implement the people and materials he gets in order to get things started.
Yeah, it's great. And you think about Joseph too, right? Like something interesting, because we're just speculating here, but like what's he doing in Nazareth anyway? Right? Like you think about it, like what's his whole backstory? Like what's this guy's deal? Like how come he's living so far away from everybody else that he has to go travel back? Like you think, it doesn't say like his whole family's in Nazareth. Do you think he just kind of went out on his own and maybe found himself in trouble, maybe had to start working with his hands because that's the only job he could get? Like, I just wonder what kind of life he led, But the idea that he works with his hands, that he was a builder, I think is great. Interesting.
This Christmas story is so rich because I think each one of these characters somehow finds a way into our lives in some way, whether it's the responsibilities that we have as parents, you know, to be that godly influence and that godly instrument. You know, we can raise a kid, but can we raise a godly kid? I mean, how do we make that connection? And that's hard. You know, it's not a cooperative effort a lot of times, and it takes years sometimes to do that. But then you get so many of these characters like submission with Mary, us waiting. I mean, we're just terrible waiters. We're terrible waiters on God doing something, and then knowing the moment of God that Joseph was so good at. You know, sometimes we just have difficulty with knowing the moment and seizing the moment.